and a flat hierarchy everywhere. This applies to work. We always call our bosses by first name, for example. And it applies to school. We call our teachers by first name as well. And we don't call older people ma'am or sir.
Olá pessoal, sejam bem-vindos a mais um vídeo desse canal. Nós somos cidadãos do terceiro mundo e nesse canal nós reagimos e aprendemos sobre o primeiro mundo. Nesse vídeo nós vamos reagir a 10 coisas sobre a Suécia que vão explodir sua mente.
Portanto, aproveite a oportunidade e considere se inscrever no nosso canal, clique no gostei, compartilhe esse vídeo e visite o nosso Instagram para fazer mais sugestões de vídeos como esse. E agora, vamos para a reação.
People online are often blown away by various facts about Sweden. This little country apparently has a lot of surprises. Personally, I don't see anything strange about Sweden because, well, this is home. It's all the other countries that are completely weird. But I decided to see what kind of things people find extra surprising about Sweden. So let's get started on this list of things about Sweden that will blow your mind. If you're a curious person or a stalker, you're gonna love Sweden. Something that people often find surprising is how open Swedes are with personal information. I'm not talking about oversharing when talking to people. It's not like we give all our personal information when talking to colleagues or acquaintances. We post all of that personal information online instead, so they can look it up themselves. Want to find out where someone lives? Just go to the website hitta.se, where you can find everyone's phone number and address. You can also find a lot of additional information, such as when their birthday is, if they live with someone, and if they have any cars. And if that's not enough, you can also go to the website ratsit.se to look up anyone's salary, because that's public information in Sweden. Ratsit.se is a paid service to look up salaries, but you can actually ask for that information for free directly from the Swedish tax authority instead. Sweden has a policy called offentlighetsprincipen, and it's all about public access to information. The main reason is to stop corruption, because you can look up details about any person in Sweden this way. And that's something that freaks out a lot of people from abroad. So in Sweden, you can look up anyone's salary, your colleagues, your boss, anyone you're dating, but don't do it because it's really douchey.
Isso é impressionante. Veja como a Suécia é um país que está realmente à frente de muitas coisas em relação ao nosso país, por exemplo, porque eles não têm problema nenhum de expor essas informações. E como ele falou, a intenção também é de você de alguma forma, combater a corrupção. Incrível.
Eu não tenho palavras. Meu Deus, que país fantástico. Esse povo é evoluído de uma forma que, meu Deus do céu, eu fico tão feliz com uma coisa dessa, ouvindo uma coisa dessa, porque realmente a coisa te dá esperança. Olha isso, como eles confiam, né, um nos outros. Expor essas informações aqui em nosso país não seria muito aconselhável. Mas olha isso, é outro mundo, é um país de primeiro mundo.
Em nosso país, as informações foram roubadas por hackers e vendidas. Enquanto isso, os suecos não estão preocupados com isso.
This week was Midsummer in Sweden, and Swedish Midsummer is something that confuses a lot of people. Some believe that it's a night filled with drunken debauchery and random sex in the bushes. Well, it is, but so is any Friday night in Sweden. Some believe that Midsummer is a perfect time to visit Sweden. They expect to be part of a huge nationwide celebration. Well, they're mostly gonna see an empty city, because most Swedes are out in the countryside with family and friends. Midsummer isn't so much a public party time as a time to celebrate with people who are close to you. That said, you can definitely find public midsummer celebrations and events as well, but that's not what most Swedes associate with midsummer. On Midsummer, you're supposed to eat traditional midsummer food, drink midsummer schnapps, and sing midsummer songs. Oh, and dance like frogs around the maypole. Yeah, I guess that looks a bit weird. Små grodorna is a
parece muito
famous, or maybe
divertido.
infamous, Midsummer song about little frogs. It's actually based on an old French military marching song about onions. Some believe that the English took that song and rewrote it to be about frogs to make fun of the French, and the Swedes then imported it and made it into a Swedish frog song instead. Either way, it's been sung in Sweden ever since the 1800s. And I guess that foreigners are pretty confused when they see grown Swedes hop around to it every midsummer.
Fantástico.
Eu fico imaginando que quando formos à Suécia, vamos ter que programar muito bem, porque a gente precisa experimentar todas essas coisas. E a gente quer experimentar tantas coisas que acontecem em épocas diferentes e eu não sei como vai ser, mas a gente precisa experimentar tudo.
Swedes don't just drink a lot of schnapps, they also drink a lot of milk. Even though I'm not proving the point right now because I'm drinking Coke Zero, but trust me on this one. I didn't do that mess, by the way. It was the people before me, I promise. Dairy products are extremely common in Sweden and in Scandinavia in general. Sweden used to be in the top 10 countries in the world when it comes to milk consumption, but it seems like we've fallen to place 14, which is still pretty high up. In most countries in the world, it's not very common to drink milk, or at least not for grown-ups to do so. In fact, most people in the world are lactose intolerant. 65% of the world can't drink milk. Or, well, they can, but they have to go to the bathroom afterwards. But Swedes can drink milk, and they do. Scientists used to believe that Scandinavians drank a lot of milk because we don't get a lot of sun up here, and milk contains the necessary vitamin D. But these days they believe that the reason why Sweden started to consume milk is much simpler. People were starving and they took what they could get, and that meant that we built up lactose tolerance over time. But many people in the world are still blown away when they see a grown Swedish man drink a glass of milk with their dinner.
Mas eu estou chocada porque a gente já tinha visto que muitos países escandinavos, nórdicos, eles gostam de beber leite. Mas eu não sabia que as pessoas viam estranho um adulto beber leite.
Eu acho que a gente vai se incluir junto com os adultos suecos. E aqui a gente gosta de beber leite também.
Em nosso país não é visto como uma coisa estranha você ser adulto e beber leite. É muito normal isso aqui.
Na verdade, o leite puro, a gente não tem muito hábito de tomar leite puro. Pelo menos aqui na região onde a gente mora. A gente costuma consumir leite, mas sempre com algum complemento.
Onde eu morava, muitas pessoas bebiam leite puro.
Swedish candy is something that seems to surprise a lot of people. First of all, we have lösgodis. It's very common to mix and match your own candy at Swedish stores. Also, salty licorice isn't eaten much outside of the Nordics. For a good reason, according to me. Some Swedes love it and some hate it, like me. But I think that just about everyone abroad finds it absolutely disgusting. It's very popular in Finland though, even more so than in Sweden. But the most surprising thing about Swedish candy is most likely lördagsgodis. Swedes eat a lot of candy, and in the 1950s the concept of lördagsgodis was introduced to only eat candy on Saturdays. The idea was to limit candy snacking to just 1 day per week to improve dental hygiene. So there was a big push to ensure that kids and grown-ups only eat their sugary treats on one specific day. And that continues to this very day. Lördagsgodis is still going strong in Sweden, and that's something that many foreigners find strange.
Caramba, isso parece ser muito bom.
If you're a kid visiting a friend in Sweden, then that friend's family will often be quite hospitable. You might get lemonade and a cookie, and you'll be greeted warmly. But then comes dinner time, and that's when something very Swedish might happen. In other countries, that visiting kid will be invited to join the dinner table, and everyone will do their best to stuff them full of food. In Sweden, that kid might be asked to wait in the friend's room instead, while the whole family finishes dinner. No food for you. This isn't always the case. Some families will happily share food with a visiting kid, but it's not all that common. And it's not just about Swedes being stingy bastards, it's also about propriety. Many families only cook exactly what's needed for their family, so if someone joins unexpectedly, then people would have to go hungry. It's basically considered bad form to arrive unannounced for dinner. And it's also considered bad form to feed someone else's kid without checking with their parents first, because that might upset their dinner plans. So for all of those reasons, it became standard practice in Sweden to not invite visiting kids to the dinner table. And that's apparently something that shocks many people online.
Eu não fico chocado de maneira nenhuma e eu estou achando impressionante a educação dos suecos.
Sim, mas faz todo sentido isso que ele disse, porque realmente, se você for parar para pensar, são pontos que realmente tem a ver, né? Você vai oferecer coisas que nem sabe se a criança pode comer, e isso que eles fazem também é para não desperdiçar comida. Então, assim, é perfeito. Eles são maravilhosos.
Sweden is very informal. We would never call anyone Mr. or Sir, unless they're knighted, of course. Mostly because we speak Swedish and not English, but also because we believe in equality and a flat hierarchy everywhere. This applies to work. We always call our bosses by first name, for example. And it applies to school. We call our teachers by first name as well. And we don't call older people ma'am or sir. We call them old farts and tell them to get out of the way. Okay, maybe not the last part, but the main point is that Sweden is an extremely informal country. Much more so than America and the UK, and definitely more informal than Germany. But then again, that country does have a metaphorical stick up its rear end, so...
Você vê que o país tem a cultura tão linda e ainda é um país muito lindo, né? Então é tudo muito bom lá.
Exatamente, porque uma coisa complementa a outra.
Swedes are sometimes called the loneliest people in the world, and there's some truth to that. Swedes are infamously introverted, and they're very particular about personal space. You'd better keep your distance if you ever visit Sweden, and don't talk to strangers, especially not on the bus or the subway. And Swedes live by themselves to a higher degree than any other country in the world. According to a study in 2014, Sweden has the most single households in the world. 47% of grown-ups live by themselves. A later study reports that number to be closer to 40% instead, but it's still a huge number. It used to be common for Swedes to move out as soon as they could, often at 16 or 18 years old. These days, that age is increasing, mostly because it's too expensive, but it's still much earlier than in most countries. And Swedes aren't in a hurry to move together with a significant other either. They often keep two separate households. But this doesn't mean that Swedes are lonely. Loneliness is subjective after all, and Swedes simply like to have a lot of space, both when it comes to personal space and space to be yourself at home.
Eu entendo isso perfeitamente sobre a questão do espaço pessoal, mas eu confesso que eu acho estranho quando dizem que pessoas acham estranho não falar com pessoas no ônibus. Porque assim, a gente entra no ônibus e eu, pelo menos, quando peguei ônibus sozinha, não fiquei conversando com as pessoas.
Eu também não tenho esse hábito, não.
É muito limpo lá, né?
And speaking of homes, when visiting a Swedish house or apartment, it's customary to do something called husesyn, to inspect the person's home. You look at bookshelves, you enter the bedroom, and you comment on weird and possibly wonderful things you might find at the person's home. It's a pretty intimate look at someone's house, and it can be a nice icebreaker. But it can also be quite shocking to some cultures, such as the Japanese, who are quite protective about their intimacy and typically don't let visitors enter the bedroom. So I guess that type of Swedish openness can really blow the Japanese people's minds. Sweden and the rest of Scandinavia is often described as a high-trust society. People in Sweden trust others to a higher degree than many other countries. And we also trust our institutions, and that's the thing that really makes people raise their eyebrows. Swedes used to trust the government, and newspapers, and unions, and basically any other type of institution in the country. Things are changing these days. There's more cynicism and more skepticism, rightfully so. But there's still a lot of trust that the government wants what's best for us, compared to in other countries. Sometimes I believe that that's something that's helped Sweden become efficient and successful. And sometimes I think that it's made us naive compared to the rest of the world. But it's still something that surprises many people about Sweden.
Essa questão da crença nas instituições realmente é muito interessante, que eles têm uma confiança nas instituições, mas eles têm uma certa confiança em relação ao outro, devido a esse respeito do espaço de um para o outro. Em nosso país, muitas pessoas não acreditam tanto nas instituições, porque aqui a gente tem uma situação socialmente complicada em nosso país. Mas é algo que não acontece na Suécia, porque já é um país muito mais evoluído que o nosso.
É verdade, eu vejo essa crença deles tem um respaldo, né? Justamente o que a gente vê nos vídeos e o que eles experimentam no dia a dia deles. Então não é simplesmente crer por crer, eles realmente têm coisas e razões para acreditar nisso, né?
Now, something that really blows people away about Sweden and all of Scandinavia is allemansrätten, the right to roam in nature. You can go anywhere in nature, and you can pitch a tent just about everywhere. You can pick mushrooms and berries, and you can swim in lakes all over the country. The freedom to explore Scandinavia's nature is quite unparalleled, but it's not something we should take for granted. Respect nature and appreciate the freedom that you're granted, and be thankful for the surprising and awesome thing that is allemansrätten in Sweden. That's something that really should blow your mind. And that's about it for this list of things about Sweden that will blow your mind. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.
Meu Deus, realmente são informações de explodir a mente. Eu não sabia a maioria aqui. E que povo incrível! Realmente o povo sueco é fascinante. É uma cultura maravilhosa e cada vez mais a gente aprende sobre eles e eu fico sem palavras, porque que lugar fantástico! É tão diferente, né, do que acontece aqui, que é muito encantador pra gente. É muito encantador tudo isso que a gente acaba descobrindo.
Na verdade, é inacreditável. Porque a Suécia é muito evoluída em muitos aspectos aqui. A gente ainda não está no nível deles. Essa questão de você ter contato com a natureza, isso é fantástico. O nosso país tem uma riqueza natural incrível, mas infelizmente a gente não pode desfrutar dessa natureza porque muitos lugares acabam sendo perigosos pelo horário. Então...
É interessante você ter falado sobre isso, que teve uns comentários perguntando o que estava acontecendo aqui, que a gente não pode nem na floresta. Acontece que pessoas ruins acabam se aproveitando que é um lugar isolado, que é um lugar muito calmo, então elas acabam pensando em fazer coisas ruins com outros. Então, assim, você pode ir em floresta se for lugares turísticos, que vai ter um movimento ali, ou se você for para longe de grandes centros urbanos. Mas dentro da cidade, um lugar isolado não é aconselhável.
O mais recomendável é que você vá com alguém que conheça o lugar para poder te guiar, porque Não pode ser em qualquer lugar, em qualquer hora. Você tem que saber aonde você está indo, né? Então, e esse problema não tem lá na Suécia. Você pode caminhar à vontade, você pode acampar, você pode aproveitar a natureza. Isso realmente é uma coisa fantástica.
Para nós é inimaginável você poder entrar em qualquer lugar assim.
Sim, sem dúvidas.
Mas essa foi a reação desse vídeo. Então, se você gostou, aproveita para se inscrever, ative as notificações e deixe mais sugestões para mais vídeos como esse lá no nosso Instagram.
Muito obrigado por ter assistido esse vídeo e a gente se vê na próxima reação.
Tchau!